So as a franchise consultant, I've had this conversation too many times to count. And you might be in the same position because somebody will get on a call completely burnt out from their corporate job. They're in meetings all day, the phone is buzzing nonstop, and Slack is lighting up like a slot machine. And they tell me, I just need something on my own. I need a way out. So they come up with a plan. They're going to buy a franchise, they're going to keep their day job, and they're going to just let the business grow in the background until it's big enough to replace their income from the job. And at that point, they're going to leave their job. And I've seen a lot of people attempt this, and a few have been able to pull it off. But more often than not, I'm going to skip to the end of the story because a few months in, reality might hit, the business is stalling out, and employees are waiting on decisions because sales are sluggish, and the owner, they're too checked out to fix it and too exhausted to care because they're stuck in what I call the side hustle stall out. Because the business isn't already making enough money for them to leave their job, but the job is draining all of their energy that they need to be putting into the business, which is what's going to grow the business to the point at which it makes enough money to allow them to leave their job. So it's completely no man's land, and if you're not careful, it's exactly where you'll end up too. So in this video, I want to talk about why this strategy so often backfires, how to structure your plan differently, and what mindset shifts and funding strategies actually work, as well as how to avoid wasting years stuck between two paths with nothing to show for it. So if you're new to this channel, my name is Groce. I make content for people thinking about getting into franchise ownership. Steal my whole library of franchise breakdowns, strategy guides, and other resources. The link to all of the above is in the description. So let's talk about the side hustle stall out that again is the negative feedback loop that is caused from you keeping your job, and your part-time involvement in the business slows the business down, which means not enough growth, which means not enough income, which means you don't leave your job, and around this goes. And the reason that a lot of people try to use this approach is because they're concerned about their personal cash flow. So how in the world am I going to feed my family, keep a roof over my head in the interim between when I would leave my job, giving up my paycheck, and when the business is kicking off cash? And it's a very, very valid concern. But there are two ways that you can solve this that would involve being involved in the business full time. The first is you can live off of your savings if you have the ability to do that. Maybe not ideal, but it's intuitive. You know exactly what I mean in that plan number one. And then plan number two is you pay yourself a salary from that business from day one, the same way that you would pay a general manager if you were to hire somebody else. And that option is actually my favorite because you might take a pay cut. You likely will take a pay cut in the short term because you might be paying yourself market rate for a general manager. And a lot of the people that I work with are making more money than that, but it forces discipline within the business. So the business is already carving out, this is the amount of money that we're going to pay a manager. At this point in time, it happens to be me as the owner operator. And it also helps you to keep the lights on and mitigate your personal cash flow burn in the interim. So you're paying yourself a salary, again, taking a pay cut that comes with that. And then eventually as the business starts to grow and mature, two things happen. You're paying yourself the salary as the operator, and then also eventually the business starts to produce extra cash. And at that point, you have two options. You can keep both, so you can continue to pay yourself that salary as the operator and take the dividends that comes from the business, or you can hand the salary off to a manager and then optimize your involvement as you want to, and you live off of the cash flow. But the key in all of this is that you built the business first and then you stepped back. And some people step back and say, I want to go open another location. Some people step back and say, I want to go open another franchise, a different brand. Some people say, I want to sit back and this is going to be a lifestyle play. All of those things will be afforded to you, but the predecessor is that you did what you needed to do on the front end to execute and scale a business that then produced enough cash flow to allow you to do that. The takeaway here is to build first and then delegate later, because trying to start part-time delays the entire game, but starting full-time gives you the traction to eventually buy your time back. And you can always go side hustle later once there's something worth stepping back from. So in addition to being strategically questionable, I also think that starting a franchise as a side hustle makes you prone to the wrong mindset, which then presents you to maybe not make as prudent of decisions as you might expect otherwise. And here's what I mean by that, which is that not every franchise is built out for a side hustle. And by the way, it doesn't matter what the franchisor says. You know, sometimes franchisors will say, well, we allow you to own this business as a side hustle and keep your job. And it doesn't matter if they allow you to do that. What I always say is Walmart will allow me to go buy 10 grand worth of candy bars this afternoon. That doesn't mean that it's a good idea, right? And so when you're trying to buy a franchise as a side hustle, you're kind of forced to pick only from businesses that tolerate absentee ownership or semi-absentee ownership, whatever you want to call it, even if they're not your best fit. The reason this is really a toxic mindset to this process is because most of the time, even when people want to start as a side hustle, their goal is only to start there, right? It's eventually to run the business full time. Small business is a long-term decision. And what you're doing is putting a short-term mindset onto a long-term decision, which is never a good idea, even outside of the context of this decision. And the other thing where this is a kind of a toxic mindset is because you're prone to take it less seriously. If you're keeping your job, you're assuming you're going to keep your compensation compensation, your benefits, and all of that, you aren't going to be as prudent about picking the right business because you have that safety net to fall back on. But that safety can come at a cost, because I have seen people skip due diligence, ignore red flags, and rush into bad franchises because they really don't need it to work, quote unquote. Obviously, you'd like it to work, but you're going to feel a lot of pressure, obviously, when this franchise is going to be what you rely on to pay your bills. And you're going to feel a lot of pressure, and in a way, that is a good thing, because pressure, when channeled in the right direction, makes you smarter. So when you have to get it right, you're prone to make better decisions, and you're prone to be more selective and ask better questions, and you only bet on a model that is exactly the right fit and pays you reliably. So the takeaway here is to lean into that fear and anxiety, right? So the pressure that you're trying to avoid, that's the pressure that if you channel in the right direction is going to sharpen your judgment. So instead of running from it, use it, and it'll help you pick the right business the first time. So if you're dead set on buying a franchise and keeping your job, just know what you're signing up for. That's all I ask. It's a longer and riskier road in a lot of ways, and if you can afford to go full-time, even with a lower salary for a period of time, chances are it will be the better option. But there are alternatives that I see very frequently. A lot of times you'll see husband and wife teams that one of them decides to keep their job and the other one decides to run the business full-time. So you have both full-time commitment from the ownership group, if you will, and then you also have income and benefits that comes from the other working spouse. If you have, maybe you've coming off selling a business or you have a big cash cushion, you can overinvest in a business, which builds more margin, allows you to invest more in personnel and marketing right off the bat, which would put you in a better position to be less involved from the start. Maybe you decide to take out an SBA loan and then you pencil your salary in from day one, which, provided that you factor it into your pro forma, your projections, that should be compliant with your lender's standards. So the whole conclusion here is that sometimes in the process of trying to hedge their bet by keeping their jobs, people end up creating more risk and not less, because commitment creates momentum, and momentum is ultimately what creates freedom. So if you're serious about franchising, I help people find businesses that fit their goals. So you can grab my full library of franchise breakdowns and free resources. The link is in the description. And if you're ready to buy, I offer free strategy calls with no strings attached. Book a call with me through the link below, and I'd be happy to talk.